Hi folks, Dave, the Honest Audiophile. This is the Fosi Audio ZA3, and these are my Honest Audiophile impressions. I want to thank Fosi Audio for providing the ZA3 for a review. To greatly appreciate it. Fosi Audio, you rock. Alright, so the Fosi Audio ZA3, this will set you back $125 from your bank account. It is a speaker amplifier that can be run in both mono and stereo mode. The Fosi Audio ZA3 has a dual Texas Instrument TPA 3225 amp chips, SNR of 106 dB, Synad of 88 dB, dynamic range of 106 dB, THD of 0.005%, and it has a terminating impedance from 2 ohms to 8 ohms. Rated output power is in stereo mode 180 watts at 4 ohms, and in mono mode 240 watts at 4 ohms. Frequency response range of 20 hertz to 20 kilohertz. The Fosi Audio ZA3 is a very nice looking amplifier. It's black on the front with a copper volume knob. And then on the sides here, you have some venting with some copper that shows through. And then on the bottom side, you have a heat sink that is kind of grooved and kind of sits up from your desk and just looks really cool. On the front side here, you have a selector for RCA or XLR in. And then on the other side, you have a selector for mono and stereo mode. And then you have a multifunction volume knob. Pressing and holding it will turn on and off the device. On the back side, you have XLR in, RCA in, and then you have a subwoofer out, your binding posts, a 12-volt trigger, and your DC input. The ZA3 is very well laid out, nice and small, does not weigh very much, and will not take up much space on your desk. I was rather impressed at the size of it, and it also doesn't get very hot. Gets a subtle warmness to it, but does not get hot to the touch. It's very well vented and looks cool on the desk. The power supply that they provide is a 48 volt 5 amp power supply. It does take up a lot of space. The ZA3, I paired it with all sorts of different DACs. I paired it with a Mytek Liberty DAC 2, the HiFi Neo 2. I paired it also with the Audize Deckard, the AUN X1 SGT, the AUN S9C Pro, the JDS Labs Atom Plus. And I found that the ZA3 does a good job of portraying the differences of those DACs, whether they're a little bit more analytical leaning and a little bit on the brighter side, or if they're a little bit on the warmer side. The ZA3 did a good job of showing me differences in DACs. I also paired it with several different speakers. I use it with my Wharfdale D310s and the Martin Locomotion 15s, which you see behind me. I found that the ZA3 does a good job of just being pleasurable to listen to, no matter what speaker I was using and no matter what DAC. It did scale well with better quality DACs and the speakers, and I found that it did a good job of kind of just reproducing in a neutral yet detailed, slightly laid back type of presentation. There was not a lot of edginess and bitiness and crispiness to the sound, but at the same time, there wasn't a dullness. It had just this nice balance to things. It was a little bit on the smoother side in presentation. Now, when I went up to the Mytek Liberty DAC 2, a little bit of that bite and a little bit of that crispiness came through. And so it did reveal the differences in the DACs. Also with the AUN S9C Pro, I noticed that there was more of a bite than there was with some of the lower budget quality DACs that I was using. As far as the bass has a nice punch and slam to it, and it extends decently into the sub bass. If you use the sub bass subwoofer output, you can definitely enhance the fullness of the sound and really bring the bass in, and you get some rumble and grumble, and I did that. And it was a very enjoyable bass, nice and well detailed. going into the mids, the mids have a nice balance to them. They're not super forward or laid back in the mix. It's a very even with the bass and with the treble, and it has a very nice natural tone to it. They are a little bit on the laid back side. There's a little bit of a lack of a sparkle and energy at times. Depending on which DAC you're using, you will get a little bit more of that. And then in the treble extends nicely. There's good air and space, but at times there's a little bit a little bit of smoothness instead of a bite in energy. And as I said, with a couple decks that I mentioned, it does kind of come forward a little bit more. But overall, the tonality of the ZA3 is very good, and I really like how even it is through the bass, the mids, and the treble. And then the sound stage is nicely spaced. Depending on how your speakers are set up and how wide and how big your room are, it will throw a big space. And you can get some depth and layering to it depending on what speaker you're using and your setup as far as positioning. But it's not the most powerful of spaces, and you're not going to get a whole lot of depth unless you are closer to the sound, I found. And it just could depend on what speakers I was using, but at the same time I found they did a good job with imaging, and things tracked across the stage very well. I was able to trace them across from left to right and position things very evenly or accurately. I also found that as things followed across the stage, I could tell when they crossed over in front of each other. It did a decent job of layering within the deepness of the stage, even though it wasn't the deepest of stages that I've heard from an amplifier with speakers. Detail retrieval and resolution was good. Again, that depends on the DAC, and I found that it did scale with the different DACs that I used. Same thing with tone and timbre. I found that it was a very accurate and true and very neutral, and it depended on the way that the DAC performed. And I found that the ZA3 is a very capable speaker amp at $125. And the nice thing is you can run it in stereo or mono. Now, I did not have two of them, so I could not run it in mono mode. But in stereo mode, I was very impressed. Also, being single-ended or balanced input is also very nice, and I did notice slight differences in that. If you use it on single-ended, it doesn't have quite as much power and as much girth to the sound. Putting it on balanced, using it with the various DACs that I have that can run balanced, you do get a little bit more fullness, a little bit more dynamics, and I noticed that a little bit of that edge and a little bit of that crispness and energy was there in more of the DACs than it was when I ran it single-ended. So I recommend using the ZA3 on balanced input. Also, if you have a DAC that has a variable output, that kind of helps to boost the ZA3 also with power. Overall, I like the Fosi Audio ZA3 quite a bit, and I find it to be a very good value of an amplifier. Comparing it to the SMSL AO300, the AO300 has more power, plus it has a lot more features, being a DAC and amplifier. I find that the AO3 DAC is very capable and very good. And I find that the AO3 has this overall presence about it where it's a little bit more full and a little bit more natural sounding, and has a little bit more bite energy and just sparkle overall throughout. Also has a little bit deeper of a throw, and you can look into the stage a little bit better. But overall, we're talking about the AO300 being about double, maybe almost triple the price tag of the ZA3, also having all the extra features. So the Fosi Audio ZA3, yeah, I like this amplifier a lot, and I'd be very interested to see how it would perform in mono mode if you could get two of them and run it, one for each channel, especially at its power output. It would be very capable depending on the speakers that you have. So the Fosi Audio ZA3, speaker only amplifier, run it balanced. I'm rather impressed. It's been Dave, the Honest Audiophile. Thank you for watching, and I'll catch you on the next video. Speaking of next video, somewhere on the screen, subscription links and notification bells. If you haven't already, please check those off. Don't forget to give a thumbs up or a thumbs down to the video, and check out all the links down below. There's all kinds of information down there regarding how you contact channel, follow channel, support channel. Speaking of supporting channel, I want to thank my supporters through Patreon and YouTube memberships. Thank you very much for all that you provide to the channel. It's much appreciated. And if you are interested in supporting the channel, please note that all funds given to the channel do go back into the channel. There's various ways that you can support the channel through one-time gifts with PayPal and Venmo, or through monthly subscriptions with Patreon and YouTube memberships. I'd greatly appreciate it if you are interested and you want to support the channel. It'd be much appreciated if you did. So check out the links down below. Also, check out the links down below. There's all kinds of other information down there, like gear recommendations, music recommendations, and all kinds of other things. So check out the links down below. And lastly, don't forget to enjoy the music, and that honesty is the best policy.